She called White a benevolent vampire.
Yeah, I love that phrase. I mean, one of the things that I think is great is I try to include as much of Evelyn's own words and what I imagine was going on, in her head at the time, based on all the research that I had done. And I think benevolent vampire is sort of the perfect phrase because well, first of all, he could only come out at night. I make a point of that in the book with her, and he did bestow upon her and her mother and her brother. He was incredibly generous, taking care of them, even when Evelyn and Stanley were no longer together. But at the same time, he stole something from her that changed her life.
Publicly, he was seen as her personal protector and patron, but he had to be very discreet. I mean, how did he manage this affair?
Well, of course, it always helps when you have money and you have a whole sort of legion of conspirators, I suppose, that will help you with these sort of things. And Stanley, essentially, he kind of had the run of the city. I called him the Pharaoh of Fifth Avenue, but he really was this sort of shining figure who was at ease anywhere he was at, and he had a huge circle of friends, and he managed to always do things under the cover of, as I said, the cover of night. He would send a carriage for her, would wait outside the theater, and then he would bring her back to either he had a hideaway, that's where he had the red velvet swing, or he would take her to Madison Square Garden at night after the performances and after things were over there, and they would go up into the tower, and often they would go all the way to the very top of the tower where the Diana was, the famous scandalous Diana, and look out over the city.
Explain about the red velvet swing.
Well, the first time actually that Stanley had Evelyn come to his apartment, he actually had a former flame of his who had gotten too old at 19, another chorus girl. He managed to get her to bring Evelyn to a luncheon party at this flat that he had on 24th Street, and after the lunch, he said to the two girls, he said, "I'd like to show you another room that I have upstairs," and he took them upstairs, and hanging in the middle of this room in this apartment was this beautiful red velvet swing with vines trailing down it, and Stanley told Evelyn to get on the swing, and he had a Japanese parasol, they were very popular at the time as decoration, in fact, and he had it attached to the ceiling. And he had the other girl holding a string and told Evelyn to try to kick her foot through the parasol. And so he would push her on the swing, and she would try to kick her foot through the parasol. It was kind of a game, and they thought it was very funny. And and then eventually she would be doing it, but she would be doing it naked. So, but that was one of his sort of amusements.
After the break, writer Paula Uruburu on Harry Thaw, Pittsburgh millionaire, Evelyn's husband, and Stanford White's murder. Welcome back to my conversation with Paula Uruburu about her book, American Eve. From the time Evelyn Nesbit started acting on New York stages, she always had a host of suitors and admirers. Her mother saw these wealthy men as their ticket out of poverty, and much to her delight, Evelyn married one, Pittsburgh's Harry Thaw. But despite his money, Thaw wasn't the kind of man a mother would want for her daughter.
Harry Thaw is the word I like to use is demented. Harry Thaw is the demented heir to what was a huge fortune. The Thaw family was one of the richest families in Pittsburgh. When you said the name Thaw, you associated with Carnegie and the Shenleys and Heinzes and whatnot. But Harry was the oldest son of the Thaw family and had been thrown out of Harvard for moral turpitude. He had an incredibly self-indulgent mother who doted on him and who sort of paid people to sweep all the things under the carpet that Harry had done growing up, kind of crazy antics, juvenile behavior. Well, he became interested in Evelyn, and what I say in my book is that the reason why he sort of picks Evelyn out, aside from the obvious thing that she was the most prominent and probably best known, and she was sort of the sex goddess supermodel of the time, was that he knew that White had an interest in her. He had a vendetta against White. He wanted desperately to sort of break into New York society. He felt he had conquered Pittsburgh, and now he wanted to conquer Manhattan. And he blamed White for being blackballed in all of the clubs that I said either White had built or was a member of, the Metropolitan Club, the Players Club, the list sort of goes on. And so I think he picked Evelyn out as sort of a target to try to woo her away from Stanny, or to use her to find some way to indict White for what he perceived of, what he was pretty sure of was his, quote, ravishing of, I think Harry said 368 girls was his count at the time.
Well, if she was so smart, why would she agree to marry this guy?
Evelyn was very damaged, I think, by the death of her father and the plunge into poverty and the sort of terrible specter of poverty always hanging around in the back of her mind. And for a good portion of the time that she was with Harry, initially and intermittently, he would exhibit the kind of psychopathic behavior that a lot of abusers do, which is to be abusive and then turn around and apologize profusely. I think, though, what happened is that eventually, once Stanny had, quote, ruined Evelyn, she found herself in an incredibly vulnerable position at a time when there was nowhere to turn for her. Harry offered her this veneer of sort of, respectability. He knew about what Stanny had done to her, and yet he was still willing to marry her. Given her extremely limited options, she thought maybe once she married him, she would end all of this sort of obsession with Stanford White because he would have, quote, won, and she thought on some level that would put an end to things.
So Harry Thaw has Evelyn as his wife, and yet he's still obsessed with Stanford White. He made Evelyn refer to him only as the Beast.
Yeah, there were two things I think that were significant. One was she had no idea really the depth of his hatred and his envy of White. I mean, I liken Harry to a Poe character. He's like Montresor in the Cask of Amontillado, because everything that he wants to be, White is, and the things that White did that were less than scrupulous, Harry did and more. Evelyn never really understood, I think, until it was too late, the capacity that Harry had for violence. I mean, up until then, he had exhibited violent behavior, but she never thought, but it was also cowardly in a lot of ways, and so she never imagined, I think, that it would come to blows, especially since they were living in Pittsburgh. What I think happened is he decided he was going to kill White when he got the opportunity, and they were going to be going to, on a European holiday, for sort of a second honeymoon the year after they were married, and that was June 25th. They were in New York, and that day, Harry told Evelyn they were going to be going to a performance at Madison Square Garden. This is really strange because, as I said earlier, Harry made a point of not going anywhere associated with White, and here they were going to be going to Madison Square Garden, which was White's, the crowning achievement, architectural achievement. I think for him it was going to be either then or never, and I think in his own delusional state he thought he thought he was going to kill White, they were going to get on a boat and go to Europe until things blew over, or he was going to kill White, and he was going to stand there while everybody applauded him for, ridding the city of this terrible, lecherous villain, and didn't turn out that way.